What's up, everyone? Welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and this is Crossover Commerce, presented by PingPong Payments, the leading global payments provider helping sellers keep more of their hard-earned money. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Crossover Commerce. I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and this is my corner of the internet where I bring the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space. It already looks like my video and audio haven't reset, so I apologize for that. I'm going to try to do everything on my back end, but technology, sometimes it doesn't catch up. But if this is your first time or your 234th time, I believe is what the episode we are on now, 234, that's right. If you have been a fan of the show, or if you've just stumbled upon my corner of the internet, we bring the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space, talking about anything from either growing your business as an entrepreneur for the first time, maybe going into the e-commerce world, Amazon direct to consumer, growing on different multiple marketplaces around the world, scaling your business, talking about marketing, advertising, sourcing, logistics. The list goes on and on and on, which is good for you, the listener, because my experts that I bring on, and I call them friends of the show after they make it through an episode with me, they are the best and the brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space. So get out your pens and pencils or take it down your notes on whatever device you're listening on and pay attention. That's because all of the episodes that we've had in the past have such great information, such great content in terms of what you're going to be looking for today. Different topics come and go as we do this live. So if you're watching this on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and you have a question for myself or our guests, you can always ask below in the comment section. Just go below and answer your question, write your questions. If you happen to catch this after a live session, no worries. You can always just go ahead and tag myself or our guest, and we'll make sure we get those answered as well. Every time I have this podcast, I always have a bunch of different takeaways, and I've yet to kind of hit this threshold, if you will, on the crossover commerce. We've been able to have lots of different companies called aggregators in the space, a lot of news happening where there's a lot popping up, then there's a lot laying off. There's all these comings and goings, lots of friends in those companies that are trying to grow brands at scale. But we never really turned the lens on a company or been able to capture somebody who's been able to sit down with us and kind of talk about that exit process, if you will, from the eyes of a seller. Not that it's not fascinating, but obviously, as you can probably imagine, there's lots of NDAs. A lot of people want to be secretive about what business they might be exiting, depending on lots of legalities. But honestly, it's really cool to understand from the perspective of a seller what the process is like, how to understand why they decided to go through an exit process, what made them not be able to push and continue on with that journey. Or, there might just be other reasons that a lot of people are asking those questions. So we're going to be kind of sleuths of detectives today and asking the questions to somebody I was introduced to. He's based in Canada. His name is Stephen Aikman. He was one of the top sellers in Canada's marketplace for skincare. Grew his business to 8-figure seller, exited back his business in 2019. And I'm really lucky that he said yes to the podcast. Like, I am very lucky that a lot of people say yes to this podcast, but I'm really excited to interview and talk with him today. Please welcome to Crossover Commerce, Stephen Aikman. I will unmute you right now. There, Stephen. I'll go and do it. Ready, set. Now we're good.
Hey, Ryan.
Welcome to the Crossover Commerce.
Thank you, Ryan. You got me scared, though, because you said we may not be friends after this podcast. So,
I say we call people friends of the show. Yeah. So this is a running joke that kind of naturally happened. I know you know this because you've listened to all 233 episodes now. Before, I jokingly started calling people friends of the show after they make it through an hour with me. If they show up again, they're really friends of the show. But hey, I want to consider them friends because they haven't left in the middle of a podcast. So that's a win in my book. So I appreciate you taking some time today to kind of sit down with me. And I know you're a busy man. You have a lot of different things going on too, but I appreciate you joining us today.
No, it's great. I'd like for inviting me, and I'm glad to share my story.
Yeah. So we were introduced to by one of my colleagues, actually, Eric Schutzler. He's actually been on the podcast before. So shout out to Eric. I know he's listening today because he's a diehard fan as well. He introduced us because you guys were connected in prior experiences working with Amazon. Is that correct? How did you guys connect?
Not exactly it. He was working, developing the Middle East marketplace and connected with me to sort of, I guess, expand into that place of the world and work with him and got to know him quite well.
Gotcha. So did that happen, or I guess like let me hear your story first and foremost. Like, what did you have a history again? If I read your LinkedIn bio, that would be pretty boring. But hearing it from you, I'm sure it's a lot better journey than that. But you spent 25 years working for a company. You decided there was time to change. Like, what's that story like for you, and how did you get into e-commerce?
It's a great. Well, I should update my LinkedIn bio if it's that boring.
No, if I read it, it would be boring.
Okay, got
I
it.
can't bring color to everything, man.
Yeah, no, listen, I think we kind of step back a bit and we all think about entrepreneurship and we all think about we want to be next Elon Musk or whoever it might your visionary might be, and sometimes as we do that, we have two paths. So you go down the traditional path of trying, and then eventually you stumble upon something, and others you kind of do that traditional path, and that traditional path might be a little side business. And for me, it was that side business that turned into something a lot bigger than I thought.
So
Um,
something that you weren't expecting, but you were putting in the work and it kept growing and it started to shift
yeah,
in that direction.
exactly. I had mentioned, you mentioned me 25 years. I had worked for a really great company called RBC, which is a large bank up in Canada. And really enjoyed working that traditional route and had that fun 9 to 5 job. And in 2013, I was introduced into sort of the e-commerce space, and at the time, it certainly was to look at sort of being that side business. And people who are very familiar with the e-commerce and Amazon, that sort of, I would say that's when the sort of that thrust of the e-business started to occur, right in the middle of it. And I was very fortunate to be part of that wave. But it doesn't come by chance. You have to still work your ass off. And for me, I focused in on. Was very, very fortunate to have some great relationships with some very strong experts in the skincare business, and who also was located around the corner from me. And so, working with them on a partnership to create a different brand and bring that brand to where I thought was a market opportunity, and that was being in the organic and natural skincare space that people wanted to explore. So I think capitalizing on one, the market opportunity being this organic natural skincare, to having a great product, and working with some great people who know what they're doing. Because trust me, Ryan, I didn't know skincare before all this, so it was all new to me. I just knew a bit about business.
They don't teach you that in the banking world. The 25 years, they don't teach you about organic skincare along
I
the way.
should have listened to my wife a long time ago. She's listen, we're hitting that stage, and I will never say her age, but I'll swear to God, she never looks older than 29. So
That's
I,
right.
I always say it's the skincare. Yeah, and I think as you go into these businesses, whether it's skincare or something else, people. What in my case, it was as sort of an opportunity to do something on the side, and I took that opportunity and just, I think leveraging platforms such as Amazon gets you to reach 70% of the population out there. And if you got a good product, and you know how to deliver that product, people will like it. And for me, certainly was a snowball effect. It just started to snowball from a few folks who liked it, and then it just started to grow from there.
That's amazing. I love that story. So, going into some details, just to straighten a couple of things out. So, someone approached you about this opportunity. You said it was a side business. So, this isn't something you sought out of, hey, 25 years in the banking industry. I need to make another source of income. This is something that was like a hobby to you, or someone approached you about it. Like, what was more of that
Yeah, no, I
feeling
think,
when you get started?
certainly there was a lot of folks that I knew that was getting into the Amazon world. And I think understanding what people were doing, obviously different products, different categories, but the principle was the same. It was to offer an offering to clients through that channel or distribution market. And for me, in terms of the skincare part of it, that was sort of a little bit of folks that I knew that sort of fell in my lap, and right place, right time.
Right. So what year, do you mind if I ask, what year did you get started selling?
Be 2013, I think it was.
Okay, so you were there very early on ages or stages of FBA becoming pretty prominent, correct?
Correct, and I think one of the things that was happening in that sort of space, and this is being in Canada, is that they were trying to build a Canadian .ca marketplace, and so you had a lot of business development managers who really was willing to go out for you and promote for you, and so being connected with them from the Amazon world. I was very fortunate to have them support me in terms of putting our brand on the map.
Gotcha. So in that capacity, 2013, were you hands-on day to day? What was it like? You had just, it sounded like there's multiple people involved, not just yourself kind of fumbling your way or feeling out how to provide a good product on Amazon.
Yeah, I think I was later on. I added a partner, but certainly the early stages was you had a lot of mentors that was already in the business that you'd be talking to. And so those mentors would help you. I always say, if you're going to, as you start this, you need to have one or two good mentors. And for me, it was living my 9 to 5 world, coming home and living the 5 to 9 after that.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm talking 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. It certainly, at first, it was a lot of, as a business owner, and especially when you're sort of in it on your own, you wear so many hats. You've got the product development hat, but I again had experts that would help me with that on that side of things. But then you had the marketing hat. Is how do you then, how do you develop your brand? And the logistics behind that. So you still got to get a product from A to B. You still have to make sure it's packaged well, it's done correctly. You have the finance part of things. So when you need to get lending, or you need to ensure that you have all the right financial banking information that's needed for these marketplaces. And then you had to have your customer service hat on. So, one of the things that I understood very, very early in the business is that we took a product that traditionally clients walked into a store that was going to buy. They want to feel it, they want to touch it, they want to smell it. And all of a sudden, I'm now offering this product line that they can't see it, they can't smell it, they can't touch it, but they got to trust when they buy it. They're going to like it, and if they don't like it, they want to be able to return it. And one of the things that I did learn very quickly is, one, listen to the feedback of the clients immediately. When they're telling you that this thing does not smell good, it's because it doesn't smell good. Change your scent.
Right.
When they're telling you that the package opened up or it leaked, it's probably because it did. Go back and fix that problem. So when you do those things, you've got to be able to communicate back and forth instantly with the clients, because that's what clients and buyers want. They want instant information. And so I wore that customer service hat 24/7 and made sure that when there was an issue, a problem, that we would jump over the moon and back for that client, whether it's to course correct the bigger picture, what's wrong, or it was to fix a minor issue that was it returns or refunds. You've got to be customer first focused. And I think, that was part of the difference when a lot of companies were not focused on that. They treated clients sometimes as a nuisance, as opposed to treating them as your best friend. So, I think that helped get over those early, I call it when you go into an ocean, you got to get over that wave. Once you get over it, it's smooth sailing after that, but you got to get over that initial wave.
You sound like every ideal seller out there that I think finds success. And what I mean by that, I think, is a mentality thing, not just a product thing, because product can come in the forms of, market opportunity, or just great creativity, or just understanding the customer. But when you put the customer first, and again, everyone thinks like, is there a gaming of the system? No, not all the time, but there is some capacity. But a lot of people focus on the negative side instead of the, hey, someone's just trying to find something quick, useful, apply it to their everyday lives, because and they want the truth behind that. And it sounds like you were the one that was putting all that on the forefront and really focusing on it, hence successful business growth and opportunity for you through Amazon. A couple of things like on the basis of foundation. Is this something that you used? You said you have mentors. Is this something that skincare, health, wellness, very difficult topic? If you ask anyone today of where do you not want to go into Amazon right now, it's going to be supplements. It's going to be something topical, something digestible, something put on or in your body. Why get into health, skincare products, all natural products, things like that? Was it opportunity, or was there passion behind that?
Number one was opportunity. It was understanding there was a niche market out there. I think niches are important. Niche is what kind of help develop your foundation, and you can grow from it. I think too, you mentioned about, one of the things people often stay away from, and you're right, the most heavily regulated categories out there is your health and beauty. And, one of the things that I also, again, I'm not sure how many hats I have on, but that compliance hat was huge. And compliance, not just comes from a financial regulatory perspective that you have to maintain and follow, but the compliance of your actual product itself. And so when we had launched both in Canada and US and then other markets, every market you get into, you have to understand what are the compliance regulations. There's a lot of bad actors out there who try to circumvent. But you know what? The one thing I always can believe in is that always go down the right path, meaning don't take shortcuts. Do what's right from a client perspective, but also do what's right from a regulatory perspective. Because if you don't, someone's going to catch up to you. And I think we probably have seen, especially in the Amazon world, where Amazon's getting a lot smarter and they're starting to ask all the right questions. And so what's happening when they ask all the right questions, a lot of sellers can't respond because they were never set up for compliance correctly. So, people going into these spaces, the one thing you have to learn is be compliant. Understand the country you're in and understand what those rules are and follow them.
Right. So opportunity, obviously it's a very difficult thing, but you're testing, you created a product. How many products what was the game plan?
Yeah,
Did you start with one, or you're like, hey, we need to have like a line of products before we launch? What was that mentality
probably I
back then?
started maybe 2 or 3, and then it just started to grow to, a portfolio of over 50.
Okay. So you exited with over 50 in your portfolio under the name All Natural, excuse me, I'm gonna say it right this time. All
Natural.
Natural Advice. I almost got the last part.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
where'd that name come from? All Natural Advice. It was just like, it sounds like you
I
call 1-800 number and you say what's good for me.
It's funny. I'll tell you where the all natural comes from. It's all natural advice skincare. But I want something when you have a brand. I want, listen, you don't know what Uber is, but if you said before 20 years ago, if I said the word Uber, you're gonna go, what's an Uber?
Yeah,
But I wanted to have your name so that exactly when you say your name, they know exactly what you're selling
sure.
or offering. So the natural and the advice. The advice piece came actually from my former job. We were in the bank. We were never, when you sell or when you offer financial services, there is no product. You're offering advice. And so I just said it resonated with, most people in Canada. It's got that word advice has to resonate with everyone. So the advice piece came from my banking world, and then the tagline skincare just tied it all together.
Gotcha. So you started with a few products, you ramp it up to 50, starting in, this sounds silly, assuming Canada, but you probably looked at US market a little bit
We had
first.
originally, I think, I'd say the skincare we started in the Canadian marketplace. It's where I think that was also a differentiated factor. People wanted to buy a Canadian brand. They wanted to know this product was made in Canada. They wanted to know that I do believe in community, and I believe when you offer a community-based sort of brand, people are going to be attracted to that. So that it helped us launch. It helped people saying we are supporting a Canadian company.
Interesting. So you were all 100% all created, conceptualized, packaged, distributed via Canada.
Correct.
Okay. Was that important to you, or is that something that you just felt like cost effective wise? You can't trust something outside of your own ecosystem that you can put your hands
No,
hands on, eyes on?
I think the first part is that I trusted the product itself because I knew where it was being made and created, and that was a big thing for us. And it literally, like, we were out of Oakville, Ontario, which is just about 30 minutes west of Toronto, and so knowing that the product is again that community-based product, um, knowing that people will resonate with that. And we actually had an advantage because there's a huge exchange rate difference in Canada US, and obviously Canada's a big country to ship around. It's even more expensive for when you are an overseas seller or a non-Canadian. You've got to ship your product into Canada. You're going to experience a lot more cost. We had that advantage. Two, everything that all of our expenses and our revenue are in Canadian dollars. So when all of a sudden your expenses are in US and you're getting Canadian revenue and you're getting that check back at 25% less, you're going, what the heck? So we had a lot of advantages coming in, which I think, again, played in our favor, being sort of the Canadian branded.
Yeah, I jokingly say when I was in Canada, I was actually in Canada 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I'm gonna say 2 weeks ago now. Was in Toronto, and we were trying to do the exchange rate in my head. Working for a fintech company, you'd think that I would be a little bit more prepared for it, but we just all kind of just assumed we're like, just call it 25% off, and that's what we just did in our head. Is that smart? Is that effective? Is that financially responsible? Probably not,
Yeah,
but it was it was something that, like you said, from working with a company that's in fintech and cross-border payments, that all matters and that adds up quickly. So if you're selling in the United States, you're going to receive US dollar, you live in Canada, US dollar, it plays a lot of places, but it doesn't pay the bills, and you don't, it doesn't exchange well up there in Canada. So you have to have something that helps you in that regards because of the exchange rate, because of different comings and goings of money.
huge factor. I think, if you can, I know this is where you guys are really good at, is sort of that moving that money around. And if you can move that money around at a 2 or 3% less, trust me, that adds up when you start talking about millions of dollars.
Absolutely. So you're doing well. You've launched your products. You're growing your business. Did you ever pivot away from Amazon, or is it always just an Amazon centric brand that you've developed? And you said, "Hey, this can be something bigger. I want to be in retail. I want my wife to be shopping one day and see her pick it off the shelf and have that vision." Did you have a grandiose vision, or you're like, "Hey, Amazon's really good and it pays my side hustle and
Yeah,
it's
it's a great
nice."
question. Moves into sort of that exiting strategy. The play that I had made was, again, I'm operating this really myself, and of course, again, you have people around you, and it always takes a village to raise a family. But at the end of the day, you're doing a lot of work, and if you need to scale this, you've got to be able to scale it where you can do this repetitively. For us, the easy strategy was other marketplaces leveraging the same platform. What you just have to understand is how does the money move around differently. So there's that financial part of it, which was a big factor for us. You got to think about the tax strategy because every government, every country has different taxes, and you need to understand what that tax structure looks like and what you're responsible for. And then the third thing is obviously the compliance, and every country is different. But outside of that, the platform's the same. And so if you can, get over those hurdles of taxes and logistics and compliance in the country you're going into, and all you got to do is repeat and rinse the same formula of what you're doing on your current marketplace, which me was Amazon Canada, then it was a big win. In order to get into sort of the bricks and mortar, that's where it's a whole new ballgame because now you're talking wholesaling, you're talking about adding a lot more responsibility. And I think that's where part of where my head was at was, how do I, if I want to grow this from a $10 million business to a $100 million business, what do I need? And one thing I needed was resources, and resources can come from one of two ways. It can come from financial, which for me was not necessarily a barrier, where my barrier was the time and
Sure.
the human aspect of things, and I needed people to grow that and grow that fast. And so that was, again, part of my thinking was, how do I start? Part of the exit strategy is bringing on a good partner or a good um, uh, individual or company that you can sell to, that's going to be able to take this to the $100 million business.
Okay, so what was it? Was there a certain feeling that you got, or was it a metric? I know there's going to be a lot of sellers that listen to this that say, "How do I know that I need to make that next elevated step, or whether I need to bring on people, or I need to bring loans in, or and tap into more money?" What is that? If you had to give advice in that, Stephen, what's kind of that feeling or metric that you were
Yeah.
looking at?
I think I'm going to call it, I'll try to say, I'll bring it down to three things. So the first one is your personal situation going on, right? So I think a lot of things that factor into growth is just their own individual lives. Maybe they are going through divorce. Maybe they're at a transition in their stage. Maybe it's someone like me who they didn't want to give up their day job at the time. There's a lot of factors I think that goes into that initial, but the biggest one is your personal life. Do you have the resources and time to commit to it? So if that answer is no, I don't have those resources. I've got too many things. I got health issues going on. I've got I'm you might be at a point where you want to retire. Those are the big that personal gut feeling is the number one decision why you want to decide to exit. The second one is exiting on top. So, do you think you can grow the business any more than you possibly can on your own, or in the sort of that little environment bubble that you're dealing with? If the answer is no, I can't, you got to think about potentially selling. And the third one would be, if I don't sell, what's my alternative? The alternative is continue doing what you're doing. And so, A, is that going to burn you out? Or B, is that going to, you're gonna put the resources in and grow it and be the next Elon Musk? Or are you going to potentially blow the whole thing up? And so do you cash out at a point where you've maxed out your profitability and revenue with the limited resources that you're working with?
Yeah, I think those are all very valid things. I think, like you said, what a lot of people run into today, and again, if you weren't listening to this earlier and you just tuned in, Stephen Aikman is with us from a seller's perspective of exiting business. You exited in 2019. So a lot of people in my friend group or my mentor group and seller community, if you still listen to them, Stephen, is a lot of people thought that pre 2020, obviously you saw this balloon of all these exits, all these aggregators coming into space, but you exited it actually. It was always an option in the forefront. When you were doing that, you're speaking to the same thing that a lot of people have to look at when they want to leave their business as, if is growth a factor? If I have to overcome all these different fees, like you said, sourcing logistics is a really headache for a lot of people. People, time, equity, those are things you can't get back. And if you can't get over that hurdle, then obviously there's no more growth opportunity for you personally. So it might as well cash out on that. Was there one of those things that really stood true more than the other? Because you did this for 6 years, quote unquote, on the side. Was it ever like full day job for you, or when did you make that transition?
So, mentioned earlier, I brought on a partner
Sure.
down the road, and that partner owned a percentage of the business, and he was at a point in his life that he wanted to retire, and so the option for me was looking at buying out my partner, bringing on a new partner, or sort of selling the whole thing. Um, One of the biggest factors, and I'll be honest, I was on the fence the entire time. because things are, and they were back then, doing extremely well. And I always had the vision that it will never end. It's going to keep on growing and growing
Keep
and
cashing
growing.
those checks.
Yeah, and we were seeing, I was seeing growth rates of 2, 3, 400% every year. And so when you're doing, your first year 100,000, and then you're doing 500, and then you're doing 1,000,000, and then you're doing 2, and then you're doing 4, like you're looking at this as this, um, this sort of rate of return and growth rate, just a nice little hockey stick. Things do level up though, so you get to remember before you go back to your resources, and Amazon is a great channel. We ended up going to, not through sort of the bricks and mortar. We did go out to other e-channels. So we did leverage to Walmart's, and we actually started to involve in overseas, and started to export our products to other markets. One is through China, for example, which actually was a very big market for us, and to the Middle East. We started to go outside of Amazon, but through sort of different platforms, and found success there. But again, I couldn't necessarily sustain this without actually bringing on a whole new team, giving up that day job, or in case that I made a decision, was factoring in of a relationship that I had that wanted to sort of exit the business, for personal reasons. We all talked about what is the personal hit. His was retirement, and part of it was, to me, I still want to see this company grow from from a $10 to $100 million business, and I wanted to have a strategic, partner, buyer that would take me there, and that's where Mimi's Rocking. And so, they're the ones that I ultimately decided I was going to sell to.
So when you made that ultimate decision, obviously for personal reasons, when a seller makes that decision, what advice would you give them in terms of starting that process? Is it, hey, we want to make sure we're buttoned up on these areas, or is it making sure your numbers are in order, or going directly to private equity, or going to a broker? What are all these different things that people have to juggle when they finally decide, hey, I'm at that point that Stephen was.
Yeah.
What do I need to do next?
So, I think so. For me, the company I sold to is a publicly traded company. So when you go as a publicly traded company, the due diligence, is high. And so there's a lot of auditors involved, a lot of people looking at your books, looking at the process. So, the first thing you do is you got to evaluate what your business is worth. So let's start there. So how do you evaluate, your business? There's different ways for evaluation. People can look at your revenue. They can look at your EBITDA, and then you can put a factor on that. And not everyone. One thing I'd say is, when it comes to individual sellers, don't think you're going to cash in 10 times your EBITDA, or 100 times your or 5 times your revenue. Especially if you're a newer seller, you have to have history. You got to have proven track record of your sales. And so we had 6 years, seven
You had a
years.
healthy track record. Let's
We
just say
did.
that.
Yeah, very healthy and very strong growth with a very strong supply chain in behind us. And then the due diligence part is very important. So from a compliance, all of our I's were dotted and T's were crossed. So we had ensured that we were compliant in the countries that we sold into. We were ensured that we had the right, from a financial and tax perspective, we were lined up. And that they weren't necessarily buying just the brand. They wanted to buy me. And that was a big factor for me in selling, is I didn't want to give up. I don't know how you think I want to look, but I'm turning 50 this year, and I'm not ready yet to throw this tallow in. So, they wanted to bring me on board, and part of the factor into what we determined for evaluation was if I'm going to come on board. And so that to me was important. It allowed me to, I made that decision to give up the day job, sell the company to them, and move over. But Yeah, so the first thing is selling is, number one, what's your track record? What's your growth? Second thing would be, do you have your ducks in order? Is your own backyard pretty cleaned up? If you don't have a good backyard cleaned up, you might want to consider holding off for a bit. And then finding that right partner. So if you are looking at just, I want to exit and cash in and sit on a beach in Florida, you're going to probably find an FBA agent out there that's willing to do that. They don't necessarily want you or need you. They're pretty good at what they do already. So what they're looking for is they want to buy your asset. Your asset is your page ranking. It's your brand. It's how people look for your searchability. So if you do that, you expect to pay a little bit less. They're not going to pay as much because they've got the infrastructure behind it. But if you're looking at people who want to take you on as well, and they want to buy, because an asset is a person as well, and if that person, if you have something to bring to them strategically, and it makes sense, they're going to want to pay more for you. So you got to factor those in. And so look at I would say there's two ways that, typically, often it's 1.5 times your revenue. But it also depends upon what your margins are and behind the scenes. So for EBITDA, EBITDA can range anywhere from 3 times to 7 times your EBITDA. And again, with that strong track record.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things that is really cool. So you are now working with this company still today, correct? That was
Yep.
part of the agreement. Was there a time frame that they were saying, or they were just like, the business inside and now, the values use, Stephen, like you're still doing it, but we have like the resources, the capital, things like that. Is that something that a lot of sellers that you've heard of is the case, or people just want a clean cut, or is
Depends
that
upon
traditional?
who you're going to. Yeah, I would say. So in my case, they wanted to not just buy the brand, and buy the let's call it the positioning assets that it comes with, and the proven logistics behind it. But Mimi's Rock is a publicly traded company in Canada that it wants to grow, and they want to grow in that space. And just like all good companies, they want, I'm not trying to brag here or anything. I'm going to be as Canadian humble as I can, but they want good people to help them grow. And so part of that was for me to come over, and it was a contract to stay for long term, and there also was an equity position in there too. And that was important for me because I need a stake in the game, right?
Mhm.
So I like having a stake in the game. I want to see companies that I'm part of, where I have an ownership stake to grow it. So for me, it wasn't a cash in, walk away. Thank you very much for the check. I'll see you sometime in Florida at Margaritaville.
I was
It
gonna
wasn't
say,
that for me.
you said you haven't even hit 50 yet, man. You have a lot. You have a lot more businesses to start and a lot more.
I'm just getting started.
I was gonna say marketplaces to take over and things like that. So in that capacity, how does that connection meet? Like you're not going out there with like a prospectus and you're not shopping it around to like individuals. I'm assuming along the way you're getting calls, you're getting asked about from all these different points of contact. What was that? If you can, again, I know NDAs and you're still currently working with them. How did that natural relationship connection happen? Was it by accident? Was it by choice? Was it when you
Um,
were still starting to shop around, or what was that?
no, it's actually, oddly enough, they had contacted me. So this was a group of very, very intelligent people. There was, I'd say, half the camp were uh, uh, capital investors by nature of their entire lives, who had the absolute business smarts and the capital structure and the people and investors behind them. And then you had the other half, which is folks who are very tenured, senior in this world and space. And so, those two folks who started the initial Mimi's Rock, the group itself, they're the ones that strategically went out and looked for companies that fit this sort of what was in their wheelhouse, and I fit that wheelhouse. And as all those stars lined up, they were also from Oakville, And so that community was very important. So having, in my case, Mimi's Rock being an Oakville, uh, uh, geographically located company with very smart people that I could work with, and a whole team behind them of not just in a sort of a executive level, but at a very I'm going to put this a functional level. People that get shit done.
Yeah, I was gonna say they get it. Like
Yeah.
they know what it takes to get it
Yeah.
and do things. They don't just sit around and theorize. They actually, I'm assuming, test, and they listen to logic. They look at data. And sounds like I personally don't know them, and maybe that's not a bad thing. That's also just a companies are trying to grow on Amazon. So are they just in the skincare line? I want to like break this down for somebody who's listening. Is like,
Yeah.
hey, is this their introduction into a specific category, or is this something that they're very focused on? We want to rule the world of skincare in Canada.
No, they're actually the brand they had purchased prior to me was one of the top selling brands in supplement world in on US called Dr. The Bias. That
Yes,
was their first.
I've heard of it.
So
I've heard of it, him,
him,
whatever
yes,
you want to
it
call
was
him.
a guy. It was
It
his
was a
name was
guy.
Bias. Yeah, he was actually was a German Canadian, and he was German, but he married a Canadian. So that,
There you
again,
go.
there's that
German
really.
Canadian.
And so he had created and started the brand Dr. The Bias, and in 2018 sold that company to Mimi's Rock, which was their first purchase. And then at that time is sort of they had reached out to me, and I hummed and hawed for about a year, and then a year later we joined. So
That's amazing. So in that capacity, if a seller, I've heard anywhere from obviously their payouts, there's people that do join on board in the people capacity to make sure. I've always been one, Stephen, that says it's really hard to replace the passion it is for that brand. For example, a lot of companies, they might want to, raise money. They might throw a person who's a product manager or a brand manager at something that they've not spent a lick of time on. You spent 6+ years before you decided to quote walk away from and join it still and even see it grow to today. You know the ins and outs of it. Does it hurt you to see people kind of walk away from something they put so much time and effort into,
it's
and then
hard.
and then see it either tank or see it not do as well as one might think? Is that you as an entrepreneur? Does that really hurt you to see that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's not for everything, but a lot of people have told stories like that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think first off, there's always the business sense where you have to be able to separate and understand. For me, when I sold, I sold the company to Mimi's Rock, and the first couple months is difficult because I'm making all those decisions without having to go and ask someone. Now I'm part of a team,
Now you
and
got to ask. Yeah, you can't just say yes to people. You have to get checks and balances there.
exactly. So I think, the good news is that I had worked for a large corporation, so I'm kind of used to that space and environment. So I could transition, but historically, and I had worked in commercial banking for years and years, and when we go through sort of mergers, acquisitions, it's very uncommon for the founder, the owner, to stay longer than 6 months. It usually does not happen. There's always a transition period, but most times that owner who started it gets more fed up because, again, they have different strategic directions. Um, I'm very fortunate that I have like-minded people who took over the company, and when you have like-minded people, like-minded goals, then you can accomplish a lot more. So I had to learn absolutely how to navigate through all this, but at the same time, I changed my philosophy from this is all about all natural advice versus this is all about Mimi's Rock. And when you have that when you change that sort of mindset of this is all of ours, I was rewarded when I was sold the company. But I'm also here to do a job, and that job is to grow. And again, going back to having stake in the game, you want to see that growth, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Again, if you're looking at selling, most people just sort of cash out and sometimes there's different ways that you can cash out, right? I mean, cash out can be when you can sell it, you can sell it straight for a check today. Um, expect when you do that, you're going to get less of a multiple. Um, you can cash out with sort of a stay on for a year, and then there's often a payout based on performance. So, you can look at, we're going to pay you, let's call it maybe 3-4 times right now, but if you reach this benchmark in the following year, you're going to receive the remaining 1 or 2 times on top of that. So that's another way you can structure a deal to get out. And of course, you can have some equity stake in there. Again, it all depends upon who's buying you and what's the strategic reason for the purchase. Irrigators, again, just look at buying, and then they've got a well-oiled machine that they can just bolt on other brands, and just, again, you add in revenue without adding the cost. That's what they're doing, and that's a very smart way to do it. And in some cases, again, when you buy another company or companies, are you thinking of being purchased? The question is going to be is, what's the risk level that the other company's taking? How much they're willing to pay for that risk? And then again, what is the structure going to be going forward? And there's so many ways you can structure an exit.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of having options too. It's like what's best going to be for either both the company that's buying the business and also the seller, the entrepreneur, the company and brand. Back in 2019, obviously we're in the year 2022. What's been your take, Stephen, on kind of the landscape? How's it's kind of rocketed up? A lot of people saying crazy multiples, kind of like coming back to planet Earth a little bit here in Q1, end of Q4 last year, and really just understanding of maybe not a lot of them will exist anymore, but like the smart strategic players, private equity, like the ones that your company is, or you're now a part of, and other sellers who are trying to survey the landscape. How do they? What is the ones that they want to see their brand continue to grow? What advice would you give people to like not just those typical numbers, like you said, of like the flashy, they're going to throw all the money at you, but they may not be around for a long time. There are a lot of promise, but not, come through in the long run. And you want to see, obviously, as an entrepreneur, to see your brand grow, you kind of want to put it in the right hands as well. What is your kind of perspective on the landscape right now?
I think landscape now has, you said, it's been a bit of a roller coaster between 2019 to 2022. It's like night and day. I would say what you saw in 2019 was a race of buyers to buy as many brands as possible. You saw that continue, especially through 2021. You saw really record growth in e-commerce because of the pandemic. People were not going into your traditional bricks and mortar, into your CVSs, your Walmarts. They were going online and they were buying. And then you saw a weird shift when the mandate stopped, and people started going back to normal life. And so I think that was determining factors, that you started to see revenue maybe a decline in some of these areas. And you saw a massive increase in expenses for sellers. In late 2021 in particular, and I think the US came out today with an 8% inflation number, which is the highest they've seen. I don't know since when, but I'm sure since
A while.
A while, yeah. And so, you have these 8% inflationary growths, and then you think about, in behind the scenes, your suppliers are probably tacking on another 5 because they want to get some more margins out of this. So your expenses are going up 10 to 15%. So your EBITDA numbers, so your revenue is either, in my mind, not the growth it used to be. Sometimes they're flattening, but your expenses are going up like this. So I'm seeing that companies that or sellers that don't have the control of their expenses and are not doing the right things to grow the revenue, they're going to have a big eye opener when someone comes to say, I want to buy you, because the valuation is going to go down. And I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing some cherry picking happening. You're not seeing a lot of these companies just throwing big fat checks at you. They're being more strategic on who they're choosing and as to why. I'm not saying it's not going to, it will happen. I mean, these irrigators or private equities or whatever that might be, these folks there's a lot of money in behind the scenes. And in behind the scenes, you've got a lot of investors that want to see growth. And so organic growth can occur, but how you really grow is through acquisition. And so I still see acquisition happening. I just think it's going to happen at a slower pace and maybe not as strong as what people thought. But it doesn't mean that you can't maximize what the offer is, because when you do own, and I'll talk specifically right now with Amazon, if you do own an asset being an ASIN that is a well-performing ASIN with strong reviews and good history behind it, that you're not going to see a lot of new people come into this world. You're not going to see a new seller come in and overtake like you saw in 2013. It was, oh, who's new now and who's number one now? It was sort of like, oh, that guy was gone in 6 months. What you're going to see now is the stable core of sellers that are currently owning that market share. You are going to see, I would say, your traditional brands that you normally would see in the bricks and mortar start to weed in there and be more competitive. But what you're not going to probably see is a lot of new sellers come in. And those new sellers, I think, they're going to come in, but they're not going to come in like they were before. So again, when you are one of those sellers who own a very good brand, you still have a very good asset to sell. And so those are the people that are going to do well in exiting. The folks that come in and have maybe 100,000, 200,000 worth of sales, sure, there's going to be someone who's going to come and offer you, but don't expect to be this great big massive check.
Yeah, and you even still see it from the perspective of numbers of people that are opening seller accounts. Of still thousands of people are entering on a daily basis, monthly basis as well. And it scares a lot of people to think that there's going to be constant competition, but a lot of them either don't exist or they're not good, and there's a reason why they can be found. Is there a way that you can still, do you still tell people you can still start your business on Amazon, you can still be profitable? Things have changed since you first started. You just have to coach a little bit differently, and you have to kind of overcome a couple more barriers, again, financially, but also in terms of service and things like that. What are your, like, you said you relied on mentors. How do you mentor other people on that?
Yeah. So rule number one, there's always an abundance. There's always an abundance. It's out there. Our population is growing. Immigration is growing. U.S. and Canadian marketplaces are growing. And then you think about the outside of North America, China, India, the middle class is making more money than they ever had before. And, millennials in that world are buying North American products. So
We like our stuff.
they like our stuff. Yes. The bottom line is that there's always going to be an opportunity to grow. Listen, if you think back to the ages of the first car, Ford, people thought, oh, no one's ever going to come up with something new, or no one's going to, have a better version of this. There's always going to be a better version. You always grow. So number one, the high level thought is there's always going to be an opportunity. Never, ever think there's not an opportunity. Number two, there's an abundance. So there's always going to be people who are going to want to buy something. Number three, you just got to figure out how to do it better, right? And I've always said, client first, client focused is rule number one, and rule number two is having a really good product to offer. Because if you don't have a good product, then it doesn't matter how much you treat the client; they're going to walk away.
Doesn't matter how much you throw at PPC or anything like that. People, they'll always come back to the product itself, the service, whatever it is. I always tell people, if you believe in the product or the product's good in quality, no matter what it looks like right now, it will last and it will be good, and it will, that is the thing Amazon looks at, is they want good quality products. They want to stick in front of people. Again, advertising, if you want to be cynical, of course you want to pay for that. But at the end of the day, if they still get tanked on reviews, if they still get tanked on ratings, the product is crap, Amazon will also remove that regardless of PPC spend or what they're willing to spend on that. It just comes back to ultimately product. So Steven, I know we're already back up on time, and I would talk to you, pick your brain all day. You have things to do. as well. But I'm curious, as you look forward to 2022, first and foremost, two questions.
Okay.
What are you excited about moving forward in the space of e-commerce? You've kind of seen it a while now. You're fully ingrained into it with Mimi's Rock. Are you acquiring? Are you growing still the portfolio that you started? What are the things that you're doing currently? And then also, are you going to enter a different category and sell under a different brand in the future? Maybe start with that one.
Okay. That part, well, I would say it would be through acquisition.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be, so that our first focus here is our organic growth.
Sure.
We're growing organically, and obviously Amazon continues to be a very main factor in this, but we've actually started and already started entering non-Amazon marketplaces. And that could mean both geographically. It could mean a different different distribution channel, but it also can mean bricks and mortar. And so we actually are sort of in that works right now, and the good news is that we have seen very strong organic growth in our brands, and that's great. So we'll continue seeing that growth, but we're going to see growth, I think, just from different distribution points. Second thing is, as a company that's starting to diversify into greater breadth of health and wellness, we'll continue to see growth. And we've always said acquisition is a very important part of our strategy, and that will continue to be. So I would say that's the part that brought me into Mimi's Rock, was being surrounded by really smart people to grow the overall brand of Mimi's Rock.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for hopping on again, Crossover Commerce today. Such a cool and fascinating story. Again, I think a lot of people just need to take a breath and they look at a lot of the bad things, but also the good things that come from it. Passively, you started this journey. I know a lot of people think, yes, it is. It is a full-time job, but you were working that full-time job hours past, like, on the side too. So it is an important thing to figure out, do it correctly. Maybe I meant to ask this earlier in the show. What are you looking to, like, who are the people that you listen to that you take get inspiration from in the space? Or do you have like those sources of like tools or services that you really like? I'm not asking for PingPong. I'm asking for like what you as a seller, like, that you get information from, that you kind of survey and listen to as well.
I actually listen to a lot of entrepreneurs. There's some really good ones out there. I follow a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs who, in my mind, I look up to, and I listen. And so, if you look at their strategy, they always keep the same philosophy of what they're trying to achieve. And the biggest thing with entrepreneurs who are successful is that they have resilience. And that means when you hit those roadblocks, you say, screw it, I'm going to jump over it. I'll find a way around it. Versus people who have low resilience, and they allow, we all have personal lives, and personal lives get in our way. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That sounded so bad. Personal lives are great, but we sometimes allow what's happening with our life to affect our business strategy. And sometimes you got to separate the two. If your business strategy is to kick up your feet and enjoy life and sell out, go for it. Maybe there is a health issue, but have the support of your family around you. Listen to your family, but listen to good entrepreneurs, and that's what I do every single day. I follow, actually, I follow you, Ryan. I listen to all 233 episodes.
My man, I appreciate it. Well, it took me long enough to get you on here. I need to find out all my good listeners out there, all 10 of them, and get them on the podcast more. No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Stephen, for the kind words and just sharing your information, your story. It's not done yet, which is really cool. Yeah. I thought this is something that a lot of people don't think, is that there's bigger out there. There can always be more. There can be those collaborations, those joint ventures, as you will. So I appreciate your time that you spent today just educating our audience and also just sharing your story. It's something that it's never the same for every single person. It's always a different journey. So very fascinating. And thank you so much for hopping on. Now I can give you the friend of the show badge, if you will. If that's something that you can put on your LinkedIn profile if you want.
I will absolutely. I made it through this, and you're great.
Well, I appreciate it. No,
Thank
thank you so much, Stephen. Again, if people want to contact with you, or they have questions, or if they even
Absolutely.
if there's a company that they might want to pick your brain on, whether acquisition or selling, how would they do that and get in touch with you?
Yeah, and if someone's looking at exiting and they just want my opinion of how to exit, more than welcome to have a conversation with them. So feel free to reach out with me through LinkedIn. It's probably the best way.
Okay, perfect. So obviously, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, you can obviously search in the show notes. If you're listening to this, you can go and check out Stephen's profile. It's going to be in the show notes or the resources section that we have for every episode. So make sure you check that out as well. Stephen, thank you so much for hopping on Crossover Commerce today.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem. And everyone, thank you for hopping on Crossover Commerce again. This is my corner of the internet where I bring the best and brightest. I want to thank, again, PingPong Payments for supporting this podcast. If you have questions or you want to sign up and, as Stephen said, utilize, and it's super important to understand the nature of money and making sure it works for you, go to usa.pingpongx.com/podcast to listen to all 234 episodes once they become available. But of course, check out the transcriptions, check out the key takeaways in all of the past episodes that we've had, and awesome, amazing guests that I call friends of the show. Thank you, Stephen, so much for hopping on, and for everyone who tuned in live and listened to Crossover Commerce. This is a packed week. We have lots of great friends coming back to the show, but also just new people who are going to be talking about new tools and features, really exciting buzz companies. For example, we're going to be talking about conferences from friends of the show, Chris McCabe and Leah McHugh. Seller Velocity Conference that's happening in Bend, Oregon. We're going to be talking a little bit about that and what they're looking forward to, which amazing content they always bring and share at shows like Prosper Show and their own show that they've put on. But then also we will be having the new company Carbon 6 coming on. A lot of people have heard buzz about them. We're talking about buzzwords. Going to be having Clayton from Carbon 6 talk about one of their acquisitions, believe it or not, PixelMe, and the tool that helps businesses grow and track resources with influencers. So that'll be really cool. So if you don't know and haven't already done so, follow me on social media, follow PingPong Payments on social media to make sure you get notified of all future episodes when we go live. So that being said, I'm Ryan Kramer. This has been Crossover Commerce episode 234. It is Tuesday, April 12th. Thank you guys for listening so much, and we'll catch you guys next time on another episode. Take care.